They are trying to overwhelm the entire system, to create a system that literally overwhelms all of the obligations of the U.S. government, that forces some sort of a reset.
This is Kaiser Johnson with Liberty and Finance, and these are the Miles Franklin Weekly Specials for April 22nd through April 29th, 2024, while supplies last. First, we feature backdated 1-ounce silver Canadian maples at $3.25 over spot. We also have pre-1933 AU $10 gold liberties at $34 over melt. And finally, we're offering 90% constitutional silver at $2.75 over spot. To order our specials or any of the many other options we have available, call us at 1-888-81-LIBERTY. That's 1-888-815-4237. We're available after hours and on weekends, and we look forward to speaking with you.
Welcome back to Liberty and Finance. We're always delighted to have this widely followed returning guest. Andy Schectman is the CEO of Miles Franklin Precious Metals. He joins us for a weekly market update every Tuesday. Today is Tuesday, April 23rd, 2024. Andy, thanks for coming back on Liberty and Finance.
Nice job. You nailed that one, Don. Again, if people only knew how many times we've had to restart because we forget what day it is, or we've always talked about the blooper reel. I'd love to see that someday, but it's good to be here again, and you nailed it. So thanks for having me, brother.
I see the blooper reel every time I close my eyes at bedtime. Yeah, well, we're grateful for your presence here, and you bring a lot of your personal sort of boots on the ground, hands in the retail supply chain of the bullion industry, as well as the research that you were frankly pioneering in about the coming trend that has turned into a very present and clear pivot globally away from the US dollar and the US Treasury. And I still think that the vast majority of Americans have no idea what that's about or how it's going to affect them going forward. And that's why we're here trying to spread the news. Also grateful for your perspective as someone who gets exposed to predatory practices by some dealers related to IRAs or upselling people things that they don't need, that sort of thing. It's been very helpful. I continue to hear painful stories from clients about those topics, but wanted to revert back to something that we've been discussing with our guests since the Obama presidency and thereafter, as we've seen it's a disorienting fragmentation in our society in many ways. And you've talked about that with us several times in the past, about something called the Cloward Piven strategy, which critics of Obama, including several in independent media at the time, were saying you need to know a tree by its fruit and also by its roots. And it looked at a lot of the advisors and the people who were influential in the upbringing and the formation of people who took leadership positions about that time and since then, and some of their philosophies and their strategies that they advocated for disruptive approaches to communication, disruptive approaches to undermining and overturning culture from within. And if you could, you've turned your research onto that topic again recently. If you wanted to bring us up to date on your latest findings in that area.
Yeah, I wanted to give a shout out to my friend Mark Moss, who kind of really opened my eyes on this. And it's something that, I think has taken time to play out. And when I would suggest people do a little bit of research on the Cloward Piven strategy. And I'm going to talk a little bit about it because it dovetails almost too perfectly with the things that I've been talking about. And it makes me very concerned. I've been saying for a long time, is this too stupid to be stupid, using Bill Holter's saying. And actually, he corrected me last night. He says, is it too stupid to not be planned? But it's the same thing. And I do wonder, quite frankly, is a lot of this planned? And I just wanted to touch on the Cloward Piven strategy. But before I talk about that, it's important to understand that Richard Cloward and Francis Piven were professors at Columbia University. And it's important, I think, also to understand that some of the graduates from Columbia University make you take pause and say, just for a moment, that's interesting, including Barack Obama, the current Secretary of State, Anthony Blinken, the former Attorney Generals, Bill Barr and Eric Holder, Madeleine Albright, the former U.S. ambassador to the United Nations. And the kicker to me was Jared Bernstein. Here we go again with Jared Bernstein. I've focused a lot on Jared because he's the head of the economic policy group for the U.S. government, number one chief economic advisor to the Biden administration. And we've talked at length about his entire strategy of losing the reserve status and the reports that he's written about it and the comments that he's made about it that were picked up in both the New York Times and the Washington Post. And we've talked ad nauseum about, look, if you want to lose the reserve status, the best way to do that would be to weaponize the dollar and tell Saudi Arabia that we're moving in a different direction from the petrodollar or from using oil and the combustion engine and fossil fuels, moving to a green environment. That's great for people who are concerned about the environment and the ecology, but as it pertains to the hegemony and the linchpin of the hegemony, the petrodollar status, it's not probably the best thing to say to OPEC. But when I saw he was a graduate from Columbia and realizing that the Cloward Piven strategy seems to be taking shape right in front of us, it really caught my attention. And I'm not going to read all of this, but I want just to open people's eyes to the Cloward Piven strategy and think about it for a moment. And it's as if what we are seeing right now is that, and I've been saying this for a long time, that it just purposefully feels like they're trying to create some sort of a systemic failure in the U.S. economy, that they let 12 million people in the country illegally, and they have created an environment in the United States of lawlessness and questioning of the Justice Department and questioning of the electoral, all of this stuff that is starting to, I think, erode the confidence of this country from within. But I want to read you some of the tenets of the Cloward Piven strategy done again, and I want people to think about this in terms of where we are. The primary objective of the strategy is to create chaos with the hopes of destroying America's capitalist economy and replacing it with a socialist system that includes guaranteed income. A massive drive to recruit the poor onto the welfare rolls. The point of surging welfare claims is to enroll as many individuals as it takes to send the United States into economic crisis. Now, this was what was taught in this strategy. And, when you talk about 12 million illegal immigrants here in the country, well, I would think that would seem to do the trick. Currently, it's estimated that 63% of non-citizens in the United States are actively accessing one or more forms of taxpayer-funded welfare. And you compare that to only 35% of U.S. households that are receiving some form of welfare, you start to think, this is interesting. They specifically, Cloward and Piven specifically mentioned targeting the American large cities for the big welfare push. And a series of welfare drives in large cities, as they say, would impel action on a new federal program to distribute income. Think of the redistribution of income. Sounds interesting. In their blueprints, Cloward and Piven reveal the best way to achieve their goals is to create a new loyal voting bloc out of rapidly increasing number of welfare recipients. Think of the 12 million people who just came here, who are being given all sorts of things, including $10,000 in New York, or gift cards, or food, or housing, or education, all of these things that they are being given. Look what's happening in Denver, and who's paying for it but the taxpayer. It says, according to Cloward and Piven, if organizers can deliver millions of dollars in cash benefits to the ghetto masses, it seems reasonable to expect that the masses will deliver their loyalty to the benefactors. With record levels of illegal immigration through their complicity in the border crisis, the left is aiming to develop an army of loyal serfs who will work to destroy America, whether knowingly or unknowingly. All these illegal immigrant children will be added to the welfare rolls and can be counted on to vote for larger government in the future. Interesting. The theories of Cloward and Piven insist that the intentional destruction of America's major system will compel the federal government to develop a communist universal basic income program. If you Google universal basic income, you will see dozens and dozens and dozens and dozens of articles, all recent, talking about implementing universal basic income. It says if this strategy were implemented, a political crisis would result that could lead to legislation for guaranteed annual income. The two reiterated this when declaring the ultimate aim of this strategy is a new program for direct income distribution. And this is interesting, too. Both Cloward and Piven agreed that the mainstream media would play a critical role in their organized attack against America. To quote Cloward and Piven, as the crisis develops, it will be important to use the mass media to inform the broader liberal community about the inefficiencies and the injustices of welfare. In essence, they are trying to overwhelm the entire system, to create a system that literally overwhelms all of the obligations of the U.S. government, that forces some sort of a reset, some sort of a change, and completely really upsets the apple cart of the U.S. economy. And all of this is happening in the face of $1.1 trillion in credit card debt, $17.3 trillion record in household debt. Get this, $77 trillion underfunded in Social Security, I thought was the big one, but it's actually Medicare Part B, which is the largest liability of the government. It's unfunded at $99.5 trillion. Medicare Part D, which is the prescriptions, $22.1 trillion. The current estimates have it at $175 trillion unfunded. At a time when we've already spent over $500 million just in interest payments halfway through fiscal year 2024, this is a situation where when you realize that almost $9 trillion of government debt this year must be refinanced over the next 12 months, at a time when China and the Fed supposedly are selling treasuries, the Fed doing quantitative tightening, and the Chinese record amounts, $22.7 billion in treasuries sold in February. And we know, we've talked a lot about the fact that it appears as though they're replacing their treasury holdings with gold because of the lack of counterparty risk, the no sanctioning risk, the no default risk, the no confiscation risk. And not only that, a market that has massively outperformed the bond market. So we are inundating the system in many, many ways, putting it to a point where we're adding $1 trillion in debt every 90 days. It took 200 years to do it the first time. We are reaching that point where it just becomes unsustainable. So I think it's important to understand that when you talk about the fact that they estimate that $11 trillion in bonds will need to be sold every year between now and 2030, in an environment where we are creating more and more and more debt, we are not ingratiating ourselves throughout the world. You know, we talked last week about how Janet Yellen threatened China with sanctions if they were to aid the Russian war machine in any capacity. We talked about how stupid it was to do that, but even equally as stupid the week before in Brazil. She said in Brazil, a member of the BRICS, that we need to, just sanctioning the Iranian assets is not enough, or the Russian assets rather, is not enough. We need to confiscate the $380 billion in Russian assets and use it to fund the Ukrainian effort. How stupid that was. Well, here she is at it again and threatening Pakistan with sanctions if it builds a pipeline to import gas from Iran. So here we are going around the world as a broken, insolvent country, a country who just voted to give another $60 billion to the Ukraine, $200 billion we've given them with no congressional oversight since 2022, February of 2022. And more money we're giving away to fight wars that we have no business being in, as we are broke and we are insolvent and our entitlements are increasing exponentially, our obligations are increasing exponentially, and we think that we can sell $11 trillion worth of bonds every year, $9 trillion this year that needs to be refinanced at much higher levels. The question is, if the Fed and China, number 1 and 2 in treasury holdings, are no longer buying treasuries, in fact, are shedding them, who the hell is going to buy? Jim Willey is an interesting dude, Dunnigan, and he's a guy that is a little bit more fringe in terms of the things he says, yet he seems to be right all the time. And it's a very interesting point he brought up, that he believes that the United Kingdom, who is rapidly approaching number 2, taking over the place of China in our treasury holdings, is being funneled under the table money to do this, along with Ireland and the Cayman Islands. And, these are things where there is a fine line between conspiracy and reality. But the point really is, who wants to buy treasuries of a country that is losing its grip on its world reserve status, that is going around the world in a very hypocritical manner, at least in terms of the way the rest of the world looks at it, and imposing sanctions where we can give money to the Ukraine, but China cannot give it to Russia. This is a problem. And when you look at our level of indebtedness that is reaching hockey stick phase, where it's moving up parabolically, you have to start to wonder, at what point do these sanctions really become not only lacking teeth, but become counterproductive? The point of diminished returns, I guess you could say. I think we're already there. And I just want people to spend a few minutes and Google the Cloward Piven strategy and think about it in regards to exactly what is happening in this country. And I think you'll walk away saying, not only does it make sense, but when you realize Jared Bernstein, who I believe is the architect of the loss of the petrostatus, this is what he's been talking about for years. You put it together with the teachings of Cloward Piven, where he and Obama both went to Colombia. You start to think, is that line between conspiracy and reality that big? Is there a possibility that this is a bigger picture where you destabilize and I've said this without talking about Cloward Piven, you destabilize the outside, you destabilize the inside, but it's all seems very thought out and well planned and interesting when you put these people, including Bernstein and Obama, as people who understand this. You start to wonder what the heck's going on. So I know you've talked about it before. I'd love to get your 2 cents on it, but to me, it was very eye-opening.
I appreciate you bringing that up again. It's not, for our viewers, it's not new news. The point is that it's playing out in more and more dimensions that become more and more obvious, and we need to take that into account and realize that the reality of what's actually happening. We've been using the expression for years on our channel that it feels like we've been living behind enemy lines, and what you're describing is exactly that. It's under the color of law, as our constitutional attorney, Dr. Edwin Vieira, whom we interview frequently, says. These things are being done under the color of law. So the people who dress up in their nice suits with their neckties and they say that they're following, they all use the titles and they have their big words and they pass all these executive orders or bills that have patriotic sounding names behind them, but every step along the way, those things are doing the exact opposite of what they claim to be doing, and they're in fact undermining. They're not done for the good of the American people. And everybody can feel it in their gut who thinks about it, but we're being sold. They're weaponizing our empathy against ourselves. They say, "Oh, you need to help these unfortunate people," and so in doing that, in the way in which it is being done, not voluntarily on the part of people who are in the power to help others and that sort of thing. No, by forced and undocumented and uncontrolled, and in a way that is fomenting chaos and fomenting lawlessness. And you focus primarily in this talk about the financial aspects of it, which is key and critical. There's also, corresponding with that, in this covert socialist/communist revolution that's unfolding in front of our eyes, in addition to the financial, there's the surveillance and contact. We had contact tracing. Bill Clinton came on saying during the last crisis, what we really need is a comprehensive contact tracing system. In order to have healthcare in our country, we have to trace everybody all the time. And just this week, the announcement came out that Skynet is finally functional, meaning that every wearable device or every cell phone that we're carrying, every AirTag, that sort of thing, is a mesh network. It doesn't depend on the cellular system, but it's tracing the whereabouts of everyone who's carrying any of these devices. And also talking about lies replacing truth. My best friend in high school was a recent immigrant from Russia, where his parents had fled for the safety and the future of their family, and he said the saying in Russia is that the name of the official Soviet newspaper was called Pravda. Pravda means the truth. But the saying among the people was Pravda нет pravda, which means Pravda is not true. And so the people knew that it was all official lies that they were being fed. And you look at what's coming out in terms of just recent revelations that the U.S. government was in fact putting the squeeze on not only mass media, which has been kind of obvious that it's taken over and controlled. In fact, Daniel McAdams from the Ron Paul Institute says if people understood in our country that our media is more controlled than the Soviet era media was in Soviet Russia, they would have a better understanding of what we're actually what we're actually being fed. But then the so-called independent media, the social media platforms and everything, where individuals are supposed to have their voice, turns out absolutely we're under censorship and control of the government. And Facebook and others, Twitter, have testified before Congress even recently that they were ordered by the government to take down certain accounts and to censor and to blacklist and all that sort of thing. And then the violation of human rights, the Nuremberg Code at the end of World War II, after all the horrors of the experiments and testing that were done involuntarily on people in Nazi war camps, that sort of thing. And now we're being told that the whole world had to take certain experimental medical procedures, and that now the WHO is rewriting their rules to make sure that these things are more enforceable and more able to be compulsory. And it's very heartening to see a few jurisdictions. Florida is one. There are a few other states standing up and saying global orders, global policies will not be enforceable in our state. Things from the UN, things from the World Health Organization, et cetera, will not be enforceable upon us as Americans. But that's just, it's a very rare sign of light that's being shown in those places where people are standing up against that globalism. We've interviewed Michael Rechtenwald. He's a author. He's known as the anti-woke professor formerly of New York University. He's the libertarian candidate for president of the United States, and he said he would dismantle almost all these three-letter agencies, which have completely overstepped their bounds. They're not in the Constitution. And also, our constitutional attorney, Dr. Edwin Vieira, also says you will find all these emergency powers. The word emergency does not exist in the United States Constitution. There is no such thing as emergency powers that are constitutional. So you either follow the Constitution or you don't. And that's been a huge departure of it recently. So thank God for you, for those who are bringing up and shining a light on these underminings, this subterfuge that is trying to take over our beloved country from within. And it's not just our country. This is happening around the world. But it's interesting to see the BRICS Plus nations marching to a different drummer, unless that also is part of another wing of this grander strategy. But if it's not, if it's a departure from that, it's going to be, as Rob Kirby said, we're witnessing the epic battle between the globalists and free people. So thank you for bringing that up. That's a very much timely, and it's something that also plugging Michael Rechtenwald's book that he just came out with last year. He has what we call the Great Refusal. It's a 9-point plan for how you can refuse to participate in the Great Reset that the globalists have planned for us, the Great Takeover. So thank you for bringing that all up.
Well, I appreciate the kind words, and I've always said to you, God bless you for having the courage to be the real media, to tell the truth that people aren't hearing. Our media doesn't do a bad job. They do no job of telling us what's happening. And I find it very interesting, just the last point on this, that both Cloward and Piven agreed the mainstream media would play a critical role in their organized attack against America. To quote Cloward and Piven, as the crisis develops, it'll be important to use the mass media to inform the broader liberal community about the inefficiencies and injustices of welfare. I mean, that's exactly what they're doing. And it's really interesting. And when you then talk about the media and the media's role in everything from the pandemic to everything, I mean, the lack of journalistic integrity is something I find really horrifying. Where are the people that are out there to, the closest one to it is what, Matt, how do you say his last name? Tobai, the guy from Rolling Stone, who seems to be the only one out there who goes out on a limb and speaks the truth and then gets, brought in front of congressional testimony where they rake him over the coals. The point of it is that, yeah, the media is definitely complicit in all of these things. I find it very interesting. And that's why you'll encounter people out who are watching this will encounter people they care about, loved ones, family members. I have someone very close to me who is very well read, and I always say just reads the wrong stuff. Well, if you look at it this way, you can be very well read reading the mainstream stuff without ever opening your eyes to alternative news sources and alternative media that really speaks a different language, it seems, and just completely have no idea what's coming. And I always say you can't get out of the way of what you don't see coming. And most of the people in this country, unfortunately, will have no idea the extent. They may feel the problems similarly to what we're talking about here, but to be able to articulate it and put it together, put the pieces together, if you're not reading the truth, if you're reading, things that are leading you astray from what's really happening, you're missing the point. So thank you for your kind words, and right back at you, you're doing this every day with all sorts of people, talking all sorts of different things that if people just watch your channel, seriously, they would have a better understanding of what's happening day to day, financially, economically, morally, socially, geopolitically, than they would by watching the evening news in 60 Minutes. So, both of us are doing the right thing, and let's just hope that we're able to get through to the other side, not just survive, but maybe even thrive if indeed we see what's coming and do what we can, just like you mentioned, the gentleman whose book, ways for us to get out of the Great Reset as well, and to at least get out of the way of it, and be okay once things start to unravel a little bit more. And I expect that to happen. It's kind of the calm before the storm right now, but you can certainly feel the storm clouds above us. So, anyways.
You mentioned our beloved countrymen who think that things maybe could be better, but have this feeling of unease, but are just going along with their busy daily lives and following the lead of mass media and so on. And they will be absolutely blindsided by a convulsive change when it finally arrives as the big reveal. As you've pointed out, there are signs of it all around. If you know where to look, you'll see the little by little. But part of the reason for that is not just that they aren't paying attention, and as you point out, it's not just neglect on the part of, it's the fact that there's active deception, active calling things what they aren't, acting like things aren't what they really are, acting like we're not getting invaded on the southern border, acting like these things aren't absolutely going to be completely undermining and undoing our constitutional republic. So it's that lying part that's especially problematic. Steve Irwin, if those of you who follow he's now deceased Australian naturalist who is known as the crocodile hunter, he has a quote: "Crocodiles are easy. They try to kill and eat you. People are harder. Sometimes they pretend to be your friend first." Yeah.
Yeah, that's true. That's an interesting point. I like that a lot. And I think that goes a long way to kind of, in a humorous way, explain what is happening. People who would pretend to be looking out for our best interests perhaps aren't. And that's why I always say your gut is your best financial advisor. Trust your gut, trust your intuition. And those people who have found their way to you, most of them probably understand that. So not to belabor the point, but, I always say it's an honor to be here. And this is one of the reasons it is. We all have to go to bed at night, look ourselves in the mirror in the morning and say, we're doing the right thing by our family and by our fellow man and woman. And I feel good that we are. And that's one of the reasons I've always been delighted to come on this show and try to be as truthful and forthright as possible. And if any, if even a few people have gained a little bit of insight, just forcing them to do their own research and see what's happening, well, then I've succeeded. And, I guess only time will tell how accurate we are. But when you start to see things like the Cloward Piven strategy seemingly playing out right in front of us, when you see the idiocy of the administration doing things around the world, that you have to understand the consequences, whether they be intentional or unintended, that's debatable. But these things, unfortunately, most of the people that we love and care about have no idea they're coming. And so, it's just nice to be able to speak candidly to you and to everyone else out there and hope we're doing the right thing. I can promise you, I know you as a man and outside of all this, and I know you feel that way. And I do too. You hope you're doing the right thing and try your best and help people prepare for what could be the worst.
As part of that preparation, and we've always been about trying to get the assets, the relationships, and the skills that you need, the mindset, etc., prior to when you're going to need them, because once you're sure you're going to need them, it's too late. Can you help our viewers know what specials you have this week if they want to acquire real assets rather than the dissolving U.S. dollar?
Yeah, we have the constitutional silver coins, dimes and quarters at $2.75 over spot per ounce, otherwise known as junk silver. The backdate silver Canadian maple leafs at $3.25 over the price of silver. And of course, the $10 Liberty gold coin, and I believe that's AU grade, at $34 over melt. My favorite way to own gold is the pre-33 coins. And I want people to understand that 34 over melt, I mean, you're talking dirt cheap. In 2008, when it was obvious that Obama was going to win, premiums on these coins went parabolic. And with $1,000 gold, the bid price for an AU grade $10 Liberty would have been reflective of, roughly $1,400, $1,500 gold. You would have had a 40 to 45 to 50% premium on these coins if we're buying them back from you. And the upside potential in those coins is extraordinary in the respect that they're true pieces of American history, Americana, and they've always been my favorite way to own gold. But after 2008, 2008, 9, and 10, the premiums got so high that I ignored them. Told everyone to swap these coins and switch them into gold bullion. Because if you can get a 40 or 50% premium for a circulated $10 Liberty or a 70% premium for a 64 grade St. Gaudens, now that was unheard of. And so I would go to people's houses with, I'd call them up and say, listen, you got 1,064 Saints that you bought from me over the last 20 years. I'm going to come fly out to you and I'm going to buy those 1,000 Saints and sell them to the market and hand deliver you 1,700 gold eagles. It's never been this way. Most of my career, it would have been a difference of 10 or 15 or 20%, not 70. So, there are times when these coins make great sense to buy. Sometimes they're too expensive, kind of like the Silver Eagles were the last several years. And other times when the premium's correct, then it becomes advantageous to go that direction again. If I'm buying gold, this is as good as you're going to find as far as I'm concerned. And I love them a lot. So anyways, just a little tidbit on that anyway.
Wanted to remind everyone, if you haven't signed up for our free newsletter, to make sure that you get notified of every single one of our interviews. You won't miss a single interview with Andy or any of our weekly specials by going to libertyandfinance.com. Just put in your email address, click submit, make sure you confirm on the confirming email. You'll get one email in your inbox per day with our latest interviews, including every single one of our weekly market updates with Andy and all of our weekly specials. So you won't miss a single thing. And Andy, just thanks again for breaking open that story that is unfolding before our eyes. It's bothering the guts of those who are paying attention, as it should. It should be raising righteous indignation and patriotic ire in the hearts of all Americans who love our beloved country and who respect that others should love their beloved countries, and not let these global so-and-sos undermine the futures for us, our children, and our grandchildren. And as always, thanks for joining us on Liberty and Finance.
Look forward to seeing you next week, my man. Thank you, and everyone else, stay well.
This is Kaiser Johnson with Liberty and Finance, and these are the Miles Franklin Weekly Specials for April 22nd through April 29th, 2024, while supplies last. First, we feature backdated 1-ounce silver Canadian maples at $3.25 over spot. We also have pre-1933 AU $10 gold Liberties at $34 over melt. And finally, we're offering 90% constitutional silver at $2.75 over spot. To order our specials or any of the many other options we have available, call us at 1-888-81-LIBERTY. That's 1-888-815-4237. We're available after hours and on weekends, and we look forward to speaking with you.